In the ER with my 5-year-old son, my wife texted, "I'm moving to Austin with him. I took all our savings. You're on your own." I looked at Carter and replied, "Good luck." 3 days later, I found a property she bought with MY credit. Then her Russian boyfriend disappeared. My name is Brandon Lawson. I'm 42 years old, and until 3 hours ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I work as an IT security analyst for a major financial corporation in Charlotte. 13 years with the company, solid six-figure income, respected in my field. I married Lauren 11 years ago. After we met at a corporate mixer, neither of us wanted to attend. She worked in wealth management, sharp as a tack with numbers, beautiful in that effortless way that made heads turn. We built what I thought was a good life. A son, Carter, who just turned 5. A house in a decent neighborhood. Joint accounts because that's what married people do, right? Tonight, all of that feels like a fiction I wrote myself into. The emergency room at Carolina Medical smelled like disinfectant and fear. Carter lay on the gurney beside me, his small chest rising and falling under a thin hospital blanket. His soccer uniform was still damp with sweat from practice when he collapsed on the field. The coach had called me, panic in his voice, and I'd broken every speed limit getting there. Severe dehydration, the attending physician said, possibly complicated by a viral infection. They were running tests, keeping him for observation. I sat in the hard plastic chair, one hand resting on Carter's arm, feeling the 4-tube taped to his skin. The monitors beeped steadily. Nurses moved past with efficient purpose. Everything felt surreal, suspended. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Almost. Lauren's name lit up the screen. Finally, I thought. She'd left for a business retreat in Austin 2 days ago. Hadn't answered my calls about Carter's practice schedule. Hadn't responded when I'd texted about his upcoming parent-teacher conference. But surely she'd answer now. Surely our son in the ER warranted a response. I opened the message. "I'm moving to Austin with him. I took all our savings. You're on your own." 3 sentences. 18 words. No explanation. No apology. No mention of Carter fighting an infection 10 feet away from me. My hand tightened around the phone. I read it again, slower, like maybe I'd misunderstood. Austin. Him. Savings. On your own. The words didn't change. Dad. Carter's voice was small, scratchy. His eyes open halfway. Is Mom coming? I looked at my 5-year-old son, his face pale against the pillow, his hair matted with sweat. Something shifted in my chest. Not breaking, hardening. I'd spent years in IT security protecting systems from threats. I knew how to identify vulnerabilities, how to respond to attacks. This was no different, just a different kind of breach. I typed 2 words and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Good luck. Carter was watching me, waiting for an answer about his mother. "Mom's busy, buddy," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, satisfied, and his eyes drifted closed again. I sat back, phone still in my hand, and opened my banking app. The numbers loaded slowly, like the universe wanted to give me one last second of ignorance. Checking account, $847.23. Yesterday, it held $97,340. Savings account, $0. Yesterday, it held $124,680. I didn't move, didn't shout, didn't throw the phone. The ER continued around me, oblivious. A doctor consulted with a nurse. Someone's name was called over the intercom. Carter's monitor kept its rhythmic beeping. Somewhere in Austin, Lauren believed she'd made a clean escape. She had no idea what she just set in motion. The hospital released Carter at 2 in the morning. The doctor handed me discharge papers and a prescription, told me to monitor his fluid intake, watch for fever. Standard instructions delivered in that practiced tone medical professionals use when they've said the same thing 1,000 times. I nodded, signed where they needed me to sign, and carried my son to the car. He was already asleep against my shoulder, his breathing steady and deep. The drive home through empty Charlotte streets gave me time to think. Too much time. My phone sat silent in the cup holder. No follow-up from Lauren. No second thoughts. No maternal instinct kicking in to ask about Carter's condition. Just silence, which told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been planned. I got Carter settled in his bed, tucked the covers around him the way he liked, left a glass of water on his nightstand. He didn't stir. Kids have that gift, sleeping through chaos while adults lie awake dissecting it. In the kitchen, I opened my laptop. If there was one thing 11 years in IT security had taught me, it was that people leave trails. Digital breadcrumbs they don't even know they're dropping. Lauren was smart, methodical, but she wasn't a security analyst. She wouldn't know how to cover her tracks the way I did. I started with the basics. Email first. We'd always had open access to each other's accounts. That transparency builds trust philosophy couples counselors love. I logged into her Gmail. The most recent emails were automated confirmations. Flight to Austin 6 days ago, not 2. Hotel reservation for 10 days, not a weekend retreat. Car rental. And there, buried in a folder labeled Work, Archive, an email chain with someone named Nikolai Petrov. The name meant nothing to me at first. I opened the earliest message, dated 8 months ago. Lauren, great meeting you at the financial summit. I'd love to continue our conversation about international investment strategies. Coffee next week. Professional. Harmless. Except there were 47 emails after that one, and the tone shifted fast. By email 15, they were discussing our future together. By email 30, they were planning logistics. By email 45, Lauren was asking about visa requirements for a Russian national seeking permanent residency in the United States. I sat back, processing. This wasn't an affair. This was a transaction. Nikolai needed citizenship. Lauren needed an exit strategy. I was the collateral damage. I kept digging. Bank statements loaded on another tab. The transfers happened over 6 weeks, small enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. 20,000 here, 15,000 there. Moved from our joint accounts to one I'd never seen before. Account holder, Lauren Lawson and Nikolai Petrov. Joint ownership. Opened 3 months ago. My hands were steady as I took screenshots of everything. Years of troubleshooting server crashes had trained me to compartmentalize emotion when systems failed. This was just another system failure. Just happened to be my marriage instead of a network. I found more. A lease agreement for a condo in Austin, signed by both of them. 2 bedrooms, downtown, premium building. Monthly rent, $4,200. Start date, 3 weeks ago. She'd been planning the move while kissing Carter goodnight, while sharing our bed, while playing the role of wife and mother. The sun was rising when I finally closed the laptop. I compiled everything into a folder. Emails, bank transfers, lease agreements, flight confirmations. Evidence. Because that's what this had become. Not a marriage ending, but a case to be built. My phone rang. Barbara, Lauren's mother. I considered ignoring it, but information flows both ways. Brandon, she said when I answered. No greeting, just my name loaded with accusation. Lauren told me you've been controlling, that she felt trapped. I listened to the script she'd been fed. Controlling, emotionally manipulative, financially restrictive. All the keywords that frame a narrative before anyone asked questions. When she finished, I said simply, she cleaned out our accounts while Carter was in the ER last night. But you already knew that, didn't you, Barbara? Silence. Then, she needed to protect herself. From what? I asked. Our son's medical emergency. Barbara hung up. I looked around the kitchen. Coffee mug Lauren refused to replace because her grandmother had given it to her. Grocery list on the fridge in her handwriting. Evidence of a life that had been dismantled while I wasn't paying attention. Carter appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Dad, I'm thirsty. I got him water, made a breakfast, acted normal. Because that's what you do. You show up. You stay steady. You protect what matters. And you document everything else. Elizabeth Grant's office sat above a coffee shop on Trade Street, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you needed it. I'd found her through a colleague whose brother went through a brutal divorce 3 years back. She's not cheap, he'd warned, but she's a pit bull in a pencil skirt. I needed a pit bull. The office was small, organized, professional without being pretentious. Elizabeth was in her early 50s, silver threading through dark hair, reading glasses perched on her nose. She shook my hand firmly, gestured to the chair across from her desk. Tell me what happened, she said, notepad ready. I laid it out. The ER, the text, the empty accounts, the emails I'd found, the lease in Austin, Nikolai Petrov, and his visa situation. I spoke in facts, kept emotion out of it. She listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she leaned back. Your wife filed for divorce 4 days ago. The words landed heavy. 4 days. Emergency motion for temporary custody. Claims you've exhibited controlling behavior, emotional volatility, created an unsafe environment. Elizabeth slid papers across her desk. She's requesting sole physical custody of Carter, supervised visitation for you, and jurisdiction in Texas. I read the filing. Every sentence was designed to paint me as unstable, controlling finances, monitoring her movements, restricting her independence. All lies, but lies that sounded plausible if you didn't know the truth. There's more, Elizabeth said. Your mother-in-law filed a petition yesterday. She's seeking temporary guardianship, claiming both you and Lauren are unfit. Barbara. The strategy clicked into place. They're covering their bases. If Lauren doesn't get custody, Barbara steps in. Either way, I'm cut out. Exactly, Elizabeth confirmed. It's coordinated. Professional. They've been planning this. I thought of Barbara's phone call, the rehearsed accusations. What about the money? Joint account. Both authorized users. Legally, she had access. Ethically questionable, legally clean. Elizabeth paused. Unless we can prove it was done in anticipation of divorce with intent to deprive you of marital assets, then it becomes a different conversation. I pulled out my phone, showed her the screenshots. She opened a joint account with Nikolai 3 months ago. Started transferring money 6 weeks ago. Small amounts, systematic. Elizabeth's eyes sharpened. That's good. Very good. What else? The lease in Austin started 3 weeks ago. She's been paying rent from our joint account while still living in our house. I swiped to another screenshot. And here, email to her mother discussing the timeline. She called it exit strategy. You did your homework, Elizabeth said with approval. I'm a security analyst, I replied. I know how to trace threats. She smiled, brief but genuine. We're going to file an emergency motion to freeze all assets, establish jurisdiction here in North Carolina, and require full financial disclosure. I'll also petition for temporary custody based on Lauren's abandonment during a medical emergency. What about Barbara's petition? I asked. We fight aggressively. A grandmother doesn't have standing when a fit parent is present. We prove you're fit. Her petition collapses. Elizabeth made more notes. I need to warn you about something. Family court in this district has a female judge, Patricia Hensley. She's been on the bench for 20 years. Good judge overall, but she tends to favor maternal custody. Not maliciously, just generationally. So I'm fighting uphill, I said. You're fighting smart, Elizabeth corrected. Documentation, consistency, showing up. Let Lauren and Barbara make mistakes. We just need to be better. I spend the next hour going through everything. Employment history, income, parenting schedule. Elizabeth asked about my mental health. Any prior incidents? I answered honestly. No diagnoses, no treatment, no history of violence or instability. They're going to try to paint you as emotionally erratic, she warned. Especially given the stress of your job. We need to stay ahead of that. When I left her office, I had a strategy. Not revenge, not anger. Just a methodical plan to protect my son and recover what had been stolen. At home, Carter was watching cartoons. I sat beside him, and he climbed into my lap without prompting. Dad, when's Mom coming home? He asked. I chose my words carefully. Mom's going to be away for a while, buddy, but we're going to be okay. You and me. He seemed to accept that, the way kids do when they trust the adult holding them. That night, after Carter fell asleep, my phone buzzed. Lauren, you need to stop this legal nonsense. Think about Carter. I stared at the message. She'd emptied our accounts, abandoned our son during a medical crisis, and now she was invoking his name like a shield. I didn't respond. Elizabeth had been clear. Say nothing that could be used against me. Instead, I forwarded the message to Elizabeth with a timestamp. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. The IRS letter arrived on a Tuesday, 3 days after my meeting with Elizabeth. Official letterhead, formal language, very polite notification that my tax returns for the past 3 years were under review. Discrepancies had been reported. I was invited to provide documentation within 30 days. I read it twice, then called Elizabeth. It's retaliation, she said immediately. Common tactic. File an anonymous tip with the IRS, create chaos, make you look questionable to the court. I've done nothing wrong, I said. My taxes are clean. Doesn't matter. The investigation exists. That's what they'll use. She paused. Get your tax documents together. Every receipt, every deduction. We need to show this is harassment, not legitimate concern. I spent the evening in my home office, pulling files. 5 years of returns, all professionally prepared. W-2s, investment statements, charitable donations. Everything documented, everything legitimate. But the IRS didn't care about legitimacy when they opened an investigation. They cared about process, and process took time. Time I didn't have with a custody hearing looming. The next morning, I got Carter to school and headed to work. My boss, Richard, called me into his office before I'd even logged in my system. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door. My stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" "HR received a letter. Anonymous. Claims you've been using company resources inappropriately. Accessing confidential client data without authorization." Richard looked uncomfortable. "They're taking it seriously, Brandon. I've been asked to put you on administrative leave pending investigation." The air left my lungs. "That's not true. I haven't accessed anything outside my clearance." "I believe you," Richard said. "But the letter included specific system logs, timestamps. Someone knew enough to make it look real. Lauren. She'd been asking about my work for months. Casual questions about security protocols, what data I had access to, how audits worked. I thought she was just taking an interest in my career. She'd been building a case." "How long?" I asked. 2 weeks minimum. Maybe longer." Richard's expression was sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Brandon. I'll fight this, but my hands are tied right now." I drove home in a fog. Administrative leave meant no income. No income while fighting a custody battle, while paying legal fees, while dealing with an IRS investigation. The timing was surgical. At home, I called Elizabeth again. "They're trying to overwhelm you," she said after I explained. "Multiple fronts, all at once. Classic strategy. Make you too busy defending yourself to build offense." "So what do I do?" I asked. "We consolidate. Focus on what matters most. Carter. The rest we handle systematically." Her voice was steady, grounding. "The IRS investigation? We cooperate fully, show transparency. The work issue? We get documentation proving you followed every protocol. The custody battle? We stay the course." That afternoon, I started building my defense. I pulled system access log from my work laptop, showing every query I'd run, every database I touched, all within authorization, all routine. I documented conversations with Richard, emails about projects, performance reviews, evidence that I was competent, trusted, reliable. Then I dug into something Elizabeth had mentioned during our first meeting. Lauren had omitted financial information in her divorce filing. Specifically, she hadn't disclosed any assets from her mother's family trust. I'd known Barbara came from money, old Charlotte family with real estate holdings and investment portfolios. But I'd never asked questions. Lauren handled the finances, and it seemed crass to pry into her family's wealth. Now it mattered. I searched through old documents, emails, anything that might reference the trust. Found it buried in a folder labeled Estate Planning from 4 years ago. A letter from Barbara's wealth manager discussing distributions to beneficiaries. Lauren was listed. Annual distribution. Approximately $75,000. $75,000 every year for at least 4 years. $300,000 Lauren had received during our marriage. None of it disclosed in the divorce filing. I photographed everything and sent it to Elizabeth. Her response came fast. "This changes things. Call me tomorrow morning." That night, Carter asked why I was home from work. "Just taking some time off, buddy," I said. "Means I get to pick you up from school every day." He grinned. "Cool. Can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely." We went to the place on Providence Road. Got 2 scoops each. Sat outside in the September evening. Normal. Simple. The kind of moment that mattered more than any bank balance. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Lawson, this is Detective Phil Warren with Charlotte Mecklenburg Police. We receive a report that you've been harassing your estranged wife. I'd like to speak with you." I looked at Carter, happily demolishing his ice cream cone. "I haven't contacted my wife once since she left," I said calmly. "But I'm happy to come in and discuss it. When works for you?" "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'll be there." The detective hung up. Another front, another attack. They were relentless. But so was I. Detective Warren's office at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department was exactly what you'd expect. Beige walls, metal desk, coffee stains on scattered paperwork. He was mid-40s, tired eyes, wedding ring worn thin. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Thanks for coming in, Mr. Lawson," Warren said, opening a folder. "I'll be direct. We received a complaint that you've been sending threatening messages to your wife, showing up at locations where she's staying, exhibiting stalking behavior." I kept my voice level. "I haven't contacted my wife once since she left. I can provide phone records proving that." Warren nodded. "That's what I figured." But the complaint came with a witness statement. He slid a paper across the desk. "Kevin Drake says he's seen you parked outside your wife's mother's house on 3 separate occasions, late at night, watching the residence." I read the statement. Detailed. Specific dates, times, my vehicle description. I've never been to Barbara's house at night. I work during the day, take care of my son in the evenings. This is fabricated. "You know Mr. Drake?" Warren asked. "Never heard of him." The detective leaned back. "Here's the thing. Drake has a record. Small-time stuff, mostly fraud-related. And his current address? An apartment complex in Austin, Texas. Same complex where your wife signed a lease." Understanding clicked. "They paid him." "I can't prove that," Warren said carefully. "But the timeline's interesting. Drake files the complaint 2 days after your wife's divorce attorney enters an appearance. And he's suddenly very concerned about harassment happening 1,500 miles from where he lives. So what happens now?" I asked. "Officially, I have to document the complaint. Unofficially," Warren closed the folder. "I've been doing this 23 years. I know a setup when I see one. Keep your nose clean, document everywhere you go, and this disappears." I left the police station and drove straight to Elizabeth's office. She listened to the update, expression darkening. "Kevin Drake," she repeated. "Let me make a call." She put her phone on speaker, dialed a number. A woman answered. "Jenkins Investigations." "Carol, it's Elizabeth Grant. I need a background workup on Kevin Drake, currently residing in Austin, Texas. Everything you can find, priority rush." "Give me 24 hours, Carol replied. Elizabeth hung up and looked at me. "This is good, actually. They're getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." That afternoon, I picked Carter up from school. His teacher, Ms. Phillips, asked to speak with me privately. "Mr. Lawson, I received a call today from someone claiming to be from Child Protective Services," she said, concern in her voice. "They asked about Carter's home environment, whether he seemed neglected or afraid." My jaw tightened. "What did you tell them?" "That Carter is one of the happiest, most well-adjusted children in my class. That you're attentive, involved, always on time for pickup." Ms. Phillips hesitated. "But they also asked about your wife, whether she'd mentioned concerns about you. And I said Mrs. Lawson hasn't been involved in Carter's school life this year." The caller seemed surprised by that. She touched my arm gently. "I don't know what's happening in your personal life, Mr. Lawson, but that call felt wrong. I thought you should know." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate you telling me." At home, I called Elizabeth again. "Fake CPS inquiry," she said after I explained. "They're trying to build a paper trail. Real CPS would come in person, not call a teacher fishing for information." "How do we stop this?" I asked. "We don't stop it. We document it, add it to the pattern, and use it to demonstrate coordinated harassment." Her voice was firm. "They're building a narrative. We're building a case." That evening, my work phone rang. Richard, my boss. "Good news," he said. "IT completed their investigation. Your access logs are clean, every query within authorization. The anonymous complaint appears to be fabricated. You're cleared to return Monday." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Richard." "One more thing," he added. "The complaint came through an anonymous email, but IT traced the routing headers. Originated from an IP address in Austin, Texas. Might want to tell your lawyer." I sent that information to Elizabeth immediately. Her response: "They're leaving breadcrumbs everywhere. Keep it coming." Late that night, after Carter was asleep, I found myself going through old photos. Carter's first birthday, Lauren laughing as he demolished his cake. Our anniversary trip to Charleston, her head on my shoulder watching the sunset. Evidence of something that had seemed real. But systems could be compromised from the inside. And I'd been so focused on external threats, I'd never checked for internal vulnerabilities. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. Stop fighting this. You're only hurting Carter. Think about what's best for him. I stared at the message. No name, but the tone was familiar. Barbara. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Elizabeth, and blocked the number. Everything was evidence, and the evidence was piling up in my favor. The emergency custody hearing was set for Monday morning. Elizabeth called Sunday night with final preparations. Judge Hensley will be looking for stability, she said. Cool, calm, factual. Don't react to provocations. Lauren's attorney will try to rattle you. Understood, I replied. One more thing. Carol's background report came back on Kevin Drake. He's worked for a private investigation firm that Lauren's family has used before. Employment records show a payment of $5,000 2 weeks ago, labeled consultant services. So we can prove he was paid a lie, I said. We can strongly suggest it, Elizabeth corrected. Enough to discredit his statement. Monday morning, I wore my best suit, arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Elizabeth met me outside the courtroom, briefcase in hand, confidence radiating. Remember, we're not trying to win today. We're trying not to lose. Temporary orders, nothing final. Lauren appeared via video conference from Austin, her lawyer beside her in the frame. She looked composed, almost serene, like this was a business meeting, not a fight over our son. Judge Hensley entered, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes. She reviewed the filings briefly, then addressed Lauren's attorney. Counselor Mitchell, you're requesting sole physical custody with supervised visitation. On what grounds? Mitchell stood. Your Honor, Mr. Lawson has exhibited a pattern of controlling behavior, emotional instability, and potential danger to the child. We have witness statements, documented harassment, and concerns raised by educational professionals. Elizabeth rose. Your Honor, those allegations are completely fabricated. The witness was paid by Mrs. Lawson's family. The harassment consists of zero actual contact, documented by phone records. And the educational professional will testify that Carter is thriving under Mr. Lawson's care. Judge Hensley looked at Lauren on the screen. Mrs. Lawson, why did you leave North Carolina? Lauren's voice was steady. I felt unsafe, Your Honor. My husband's behavior had become increasingly erratic. I needed distance to protect myself. And your son? The judge asked. He was in the emergency room when you left. A pause. I was already in Austin for a work commitment. I couldn't get back in time. Your work commitment started 3 weeks before you texted your husband about leaving permanently. Elizabeth interjected, holding up the lease agreement. In fact, you'd been living in Austin for nearly a month while Mr. Lawson believed you were on business trips. Mitchell objected. Your Honor, Mrs. Lawson's living arrangements are not relevant to. They're absolutely relevant. Judge Hensley cut him off. Continue, Ms. Grant. Elizabeth presented the timeline. The lease signed 3 weeks before the ER incident. The systematic transfer of funds beginning 6 weeks prior. The divorce filing 4 days before Lauren's text. The coordination with Barbara's guardianship petition. This wasn't a woman fleeing danger, Elizabeth stated. This was a calculated exit strategy executed while a 5-year-old child lay in a hospital bed. Judge Hensley's expression hardened. She turned to the screen. Mrs. Lawson, do you have evidence of this alleged danger? Police reports, medical records, witness statements from neighbors or friends. I have my mother's testimony, Your Honor, Lauren said. Your mother who filed for guardianship the same week you filed for divorce. The judge's tone sharpened. That seems coordinated, Mrs. Lawson. Mitchell attempted to recover. Your Honor, grandmother involvement shows family support. It shows a predetermined strategy. Judge Hensley interrupted. She looked at her notes. Ms. Grant, what is your client seeking? Temporary full physical custody, Your Honor. Mrs. Lawson can have reasonable video visitation until she demonstrates commitment to co-parenting. We're also requesting the court freeze all marital assets pending full disclosure. The judge considered. Here's my ruling. Temporary physical custody to Mr. Lawson. Mrs. Lawson gets video calls 3 times weekly, 1 hour each. All marital assets frozen, pending financial discovery. Jurisdiction remains in North Carolina. She looked at the screen. Mrs. Lawson, if you want custody of your son, you'll need to participate in these proceedings here, not from Texas. Next hearing in 30 days. The gavel struck. Outside the courtroom, Elizabeth allowed herself a small smile. That went better than expected. She still gets visitation, I said. Video call she'll probably skip, Elizabeth replied. Which builds our case. Let her show the judge who's actually committed to being a parent. That evening, I set up the video call for Lauren and Carter. 7 p.m., exactly as ordered. Carter sat at the kitchen table, excited to see his mom. 7 came and went. No call. 7:15. Nothing. At 7:30, Carter's face fell. Is mom not coming? She might be busy, buddy, I said gently. Let's give her a few more minutes. At 8 p.m., I shut down the laptop. Carter had already moved on to his toys, but I'd seen the disappointment. I documented the missed call, sent the report to Elizabeth. Her response: document every single one. The pattern matters. Lauren called at 10 p.m., after Carter was asleep. You turned him against me, she said, her voice tight. I sat him in front of a screen for an hour waiting for you, I replied. You didn't show up. I was busy. Things came up. You had a court order, Lauren. Things don't just come up when your son is waiting. She hung up. I stood in the quiet kitchen, looking at the drawing Carter had made earlier. Still 3 stick figures, Daddy, me, Mommy. But one of those figures was fading. And it wasn't mine. Lauren's medical crisis announcement came through email, forwarded by her attorney to Elizabeth, who called me immediately. She's claiming she has a brain tumor. Elizabeth said, her tone flat. Stage 2 glioma. Needs immediate treatment. Requesting emergency modification of custody orders so she can spend remaining time with Carter. I sat down heavily. Is it real? That's what we need to find out. She submitted a doctor's note from a neurologist in Austin. We're requesting full medical records, second opinion, verification. The emotional manipulation was surgical. How could I fight a dying woman? How would that look to Judge Hensley, to Carter, to everyone watching? If it's real, I said carefully, we adjust. Carter deserves time with his mother if she's sick. And if it's not real, Elizabeth asked, then it's evidence of how far she'll go. The medical records arrived 3 days later. Elizabeth's medical consultant reviewed them within hours. The MRI shows an anomaly, Dr. Patterson explained over speakerphone. But it's a benign cyst, common, completely treatable with monitoring. Not a tumor. Not stage 2 anything. The neurologist's note is misleading at best, fraudulent at worst. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She'd fabricated a terminal illness to manipulate custody of our son. We need a second opinion, Elizabeth said. Independent radiologist, full report. This is too important to get wrong. The second opinion came back identical. Benign cyst, no treatment needed, no danger. The stage 2 glioma didn't exist. Elizabeth filed an emergency motion exposing the fraud, requesting sanctions against Lauren's attorney for submitting false medical evidence. That evening, Carter asked, is mom sick? Someone had told him. Lauren, probably, setting up the sympathy narrative. I crouched to his level. Mom has something the doctors are checking, but she's going to be fine. You don't need to worry. Will she come home? He asked. I don't know, buddy. But you're safe, and I'm here. He seemed satisfied with that. Went back to his Legos. My phone rang. Barbara. How dare you call my daughter a liar, she hissed. She's terrified. She's sick. And you're using lawyers to attack her. The medical records show a benign cyst, Barbara. Not a tumor. She lied about having cancer to manipulate custody. You don't understand the emotional toll. I understand she told our 5-year-old she's dying when she's not. I cut her off. That's not emotional toll. That's abuse. Barbara hung up. 2 days later, the court hearing on the medical fraud was brief. Judge Hensley reviewed the reports, the neurologist's misleading note, the actual radiologist findings. Mrs. Lawson, the judge said, voice ice cold, did you tell your son you have brain cancer? Lauren, on video, looked pale. I was scared. The doctor said tumor, and the doctor said benign cyst. Judge Hensley interrupted. You told a 5-year-old child his mother is dying when you have a completely harmless condition that requires no treatment. Do you understand how damaging that is? Silence from the screen. Your credibility with this court is severely damaged, the judge continued. The medical evidence request is denied. Custody orders remain as established. And Mrs. Lawson, if you use your son as an emotional pawn again, you'll lose more than credibility. After the hearing, Elizabeth said, that was the turning point. Judges remember fraud. That night, I got Carter ready for his video call with Lauren. 7 p.m. Tuesday as ordered. She actually showed up this time. "Hi, sweetheart," Lauren said, her smile tight. "How are you?" "Dad says you're not really sick," Carter replied, his 5-year-old bluntness cutting through pretense. Lauren's face shifted. "Daddy doesn't understand. The doctor said you're fine," Carter continued. "So you're not dying?" "No, baby, I'm not dying." "Then why did you say you were?" Lauren had no answer for that. The call ended early, Carter already moving on to other things. I documented it all. The lie, the exposure, the impact on Carter. Everything was evidence. And the evidence kept mounting. The forensic accounting report landed like a bomb. Elizabeth called me to her office to review it in person, the document thick enough to qualify as a weapon. "This is damaging," she said, satisfaction in her voice. "Very damaging." The report detailed everything. The family trust Barbara managed, distributions to Lauren totaling $300,000 over 4 years. None disclosed in divorce filings. The joint account with Nikolai, funded entirely from marital assets. The Austin condo lease, paid with money transfer from our savings. But the real discovery was deeper. Nikolai Petrov's visa status was precarious. He'd entered on a business visa 3 years ago, overstayed, and was facing deportation. Marriage to a U.S. citizen was his only path to legal residency. Lauren wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his ticket to staying in the country. "Here's the interesting part," Elizabeth said, pointing to a bank transfer. 2 weeks before Lauren left, Nikolai transferred $50,000 to an LLC owned by Barbara, listed as investment capital. "He paid Barbara," I said slowly. "He paid for access to her daughter," Elizabeth corrected. "This wasn't romance. It was a transaction. He gets citizenship. Lauren gets her exit funded by his payment to Barbara, and they both benefit from the marital assets she stole." The IRS investigation had concluded in my favor. Every deduction legitimate, every filing accurate. The anonymous complaint had been unfounded, closed without action. But the existence of the investigation had served its purpose, creating stress and doubt exactly when Lauren needed it. "We're filing for sanctions," Elizabeth continued. "Fraud, material non-disclosure, misuse of court process. The fake witness, the false medical claim, the hidden trust distributions. It adds up to a pattern of deception the court can't ignore." That afternoon, I returned to work. My colleagues welcomed me back. Richard shook my hand. Everything returned to normal professional routine. Except it wasn't normal. I'd been targeted, investigated, cleared, and everyone knew it. But I'd survived. That mattered more than comfort. At home, Carter's parent-teacher conference confirmed what I already knew. He was thriving academically, socially adjusted, showed no signs of stress or trauma. "He talks about you constantly," Miss Phillips said. "You're his hero. Whatever's happening at home, you're handling it well." That evening, Barbara called one final time. "You destroyed my daughter's life," she said, voice shaking. "No, Barbara. I documented her choices. There's a difference. She needed that money. She needed to start over. She needed honesty." I replied. She could have asked for a divorce, negotiated fairly, co-parented our son. Instead, she chose fraud, lies, and manipulation. Those were her decisions. "Nikolai loves her," Barbara said, almost pleading now. "Nikolai paid you $50,000 for access to her," I said flatly. "That's not love. That's a business deal." The line went quiet, then disconnected. I never heard from Barbara again. The next court date arrived faster than expected. Judge Hensley had moved it up, citing sufficient evidence for preliminary determinations. Lauren appeared on video, her attorney beside her, both looking diminished somehow. The confidence from earlier hearings had evaporated. Judge Hensley didn't waste time. "I've reviewed the forensic accounting, the medical fraud, the false witness statements, and the pattern of deception. Mrs. Lawson, you've shown contempt for this court and disregard for your son's well-being." She outlined her rulings. Full physical custody to me. Lauren's visitation reduced to supervised only, contingent on completing parenting classes and psychological evaluation. All marital assets to be divided equitably, with Lauren required to return transferred funds. Furthermore, the judge continued, "I'm referring this matter to the State Bar regarding your attorney's submission of fraudulent medical evidence. And Mrs. Lawson, You should know that Mr. Petrov's immigration status has been flagged based on evidence of fraudulent marriage intent. Lauren's face went white on the screen. After the hearing, Elizabeth said simply, "It's over. The rest is paperwork." That night, I took Carter out for pizza, his favorite place with the arcade games. He was laughing, happy, completely unaware of the legal machinery that had been grinding around him. "Dad," he said between bites, "are we okay?" "We're better than okay, buddy. We're exactly where we need to be." He grinned, went back to his pizza. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Austin area code. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "Brandon." Lauren's voice, small, frightened. "Nikolai's gone." I waited. "He took everything," she continued. "The money I had left, the account we opened, everything. He's gone, and I don't know what to do." I looked at Carter, laughing at something on his plate. "Good luck, Lauren," I said, and ended the call. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was just consequences finally arriving. The final divorce decree came through on a cold November morning. Elizabeth walked me through the terms over coffee at her office. Full custody to me, with Lauren granted supervised visitation twice monthly if she completed court-ordered programs. She hadn't. The visitation slots remained empty. Asset division favored me significantly. Lauren was ordered to repay $140,000 in transferred marital funds. The house, vehicles, Carter's college fund all remained with me. Her share of remaining assets barely covered her legal fees. Barbara's guardianship petition had been dismissed with prejudice. She'd faced no custody claims, but her reputation in Charlotte's social circles had suffered irreparable damage. The family trust was under investigation for potential tax fraud. Nikolai Petrov had vanished completely. ICE had opened a deportation case, but he'd disappeared before they could locate him. The $200,000 he'd taken from Lauren was gone with him, probably offshore and untraceable. "She's filing for bankruptcy," Elizabeth mentioned. "Lost her job, lost her savings, can't pay legal fees or the court-ordered repayment." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, just acknowledgement of consequences. At work, I'd been promoted. Richard had recommended me for a senior security position, citing my grace under pressure during personal crisis. The irony wasn't lost on me. Carter was thriving. His report card showed excellent grades. His teacher reported strong social development. He rarely asked about Lauren anymore. When he did, I told him the truth in age-appropriate terms. "Mom made some choices that have consequences. But you're loved, you're safe, and that's what matters." The final hearing for dissolution was brief. Judge Hensley signed the decree, made a few remarks about hoping both parents would focus on Carter's well-being, and it was done. 11 years dissolved in 15 minutes of paperwork. Outside the courthouse, Elizabeth shook my hand. "You handled this better than most. Stayed calm, stayed documented, stayed focused on what mattered." "I had good guidance," I replied. "You had discipline," she corrected. "That's rarer than you think." I picked Carter up from school that afternoon. He ran to me with a drawing he'd made, a superhero with a shield. "That's you, Dad," he said proudly. "Because you protect people." I kept that drawing. Still have it. That evening, my phone buzzed. "Lauren, first contact in weeks. I'm sorry. For everything. I made terrible choices." I stared at the message. An apology, finally. Too late to change anything, but present nonetheless. I didn't respond. Some things don't require acknowledgement. Instead, I deleted the message and looked at Carter, building something elaborate with blocks on the living room floor. This was what mattered. Not apologies, not vindication. Just presence. Just being here. 8 months later, life had found its rhythm. Carter and I had routines now. Breakfast together, school drop-off, my workday, pickup, homework, dinner, bedtime stories. Simple, consistent hours. He joined a baseball team. I coached. We spent Saturdays at the field, Sundays exploring parks or museums. Building memories that didn't include absence or betrayal, just presence and stability. Lauren sent occasional messages. Brief, apologetic, asking about Carter. I responded with facts. His grades, his activities, his health. Nothing personal, nothing that invited conversation beyond co-parenting necessity. She'd moved back to North Carolina, living with a friend, working retail while trying to rebuild. Barbara had cut her off financially after the trust investigation revealed tax irregularities. The family wealth Lauren had expected to cushion her landing had evaporated under legal scrutiny. Supervised visitation happened twice. Lauren showed up, spent awkward hours trying to connect with a son who'd grown comfortable with her absence. Carter was polite but distant. You can't force bonds that broke under the weight of choices. The house felt different now. Lighter somehow, despite everything that had happened within its walls. I'd repainted Carter's room his favorite blue, renovated the kitchen, made the space fully ours. One evening, Carter asked, "Dad, are you lonely?" The question surprised me. "Why do you ask?" "Tommy's dad got a girlfriend after his parents divorced," he said matter-of-factly. "Are you going to?" I considered the answer carefully. "Maybe someday. But right now, you and I are doing pretty well, don't you think?" He grinned. "Yeah, we're a good team." "The best team," I agreed. At work, I developed a presentation on security breach response that became required training. The irony of teaching threat detection after experiencing it personally wasn't lost on my colleagues. But they respected the expertise earned through experience. The IRS investigation had not only cleared me, but resulted in penalties against whoever filed the false complaint. The work investigation had led to improved protocols. Even the manufacturer crises had produced positive outcomes. Eventually, on a Saturday morning, Carter and I sat at the kitchen table assembling a model rocket he'd gotten for his birthday. "Dad," he said, carefully gluing a fin, "I'm glad we're here." "Me too, buddy. I wish Mom didn't leave. But I'm glad you stayed." The words hit deeper than he knew. "I'll always stay," I said. "That's what fathers do." He smiled, returned his rocket. Later, after he'd gone to bed, I sat on the back porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere, Lauren was probably doing the same, contemplating different choices, different outcomes. But I'd stopped wondering about alternate timelines. This one, the real one, was enough. I'd learned that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about what you build after everything falls apart. It's about showing up when everything in you wants to disappear. It's about protecting what matters when the cost feels unbearable. Carter was protected. That was the measure that mattered. Inside, his night light glowed softly. His breathing was steady, peaceful, safe. I'd built that safety from the rubble of betrayal, one documented day at a time. And that was worth more than any marriage that required lies to sustain it.